I'm delighted. This is a particular interest of mine, and I will not bore you, but I've had my own brain lab for the last 10 years when my daughter gave birth to twins. And she's a single mom and had these twins through in vitro, and I, since I had no grandchildren, delightfully said, I will help you raise them. And I didn't know what I was getting in for. So, but it's been fascinating for me because, you know, my kids are all in their 50s, to go back and start raising babies again. So I began to just read everything I could find, and this is probably the most fascinating period of brain development, and I hope you will find it as fascinating as I have. This is what we knew about how the brain worked 30 years ago, which means we had no idea, you know. And because of that, you know, when people don't understand how something works, they make up something to make it make sense. All right, you know, our forefathers did that forever. And so people came up with all of these things about how the brain works. So how many of you have heard that you only use 10% of your brain? Well, it's not true. I don't know where it came from. Advertising uses it all the time. That's not true. How many of you have heard that drinking lots of water will make you smarter? It won't. No. Now, how many of you have heard that you're either left-brained or right-brained? There's no such thing, unless you've had an entire half of your brain removed. They both work together all the time. There's no such thing. Actually, what people call right and left brain are personality styles, and they're genetic and you're born with them. They're not a preference for half of your brain, all right? My favorite, how many of you have heard that every drink of alcohol kills 50,000 brain cells? Yeah, now how would they know that? Just think about that for a minute. You're going to open up a brain and count the brain cells, take a drink of alcohol and then count them again? No, no. I think we made that up to try and keep kids from drinking, and it doesn't work. All right. Now, is the brain vulnerable to alcohol? Yes, but only to specific times. And the first is, anyone tell me, when is the brain really vulnerable? Before. While you're pregnant, right, when it's a fetus. Fetal alcohol syndrome, which is damage to the fetus's brain because the mother consumed alcohol, is the leading preventable cause of mental retardation in the US today. All right. Any idea when the second time that the brain is particularly vulnerable to alcohol in the stages of development? What do you think? What do you think?
Aged humans.
No, it's not. You and I can have all we want. You're not as old as I am, that's okay. What do you think?
Culturally, it's in the early teen years, I
Yes.
think, although I think it would also be true if they were exposed to alcohol and their brain's growing rapidly around age 2.
Actually, that one does not seem to be a problem. It is adolescence. Yeah, and adolescence begins at 11, earlier in some kids we're finding, 10, 11, 12. And do you know when the end of adolescence is, when the brain is pretty much formed? 25, 26, some researchers are even saying 30. Right, all right. So you can have all you want. Now, I'm not saying that alcohol doesn't have any impact on your brain. Of course it does. You drink too much, you get up on a table and dance with a lampshade on your head or something like that. However, it does not kill brain cells. All right. So we have a lot of these myths that have come up. And what has happened is that the only way you could study a brain until recently was through autopsy. So somebody died and they donated their brain for the scientists to study. Well, this is an autopsied brain. And you can't tell anything. I can't tell you, well, I happen to know, but you don't know whether this is male or female. You don't know whether this is a person that has autism, ADHD. You can't tell anything by looking at this, all right? Now, the only time they use autopsy brains today is for Alzheimer's, because you can take a very thin slice of the brain, put it underneath a very powerful microscope, and if the person has Alzheimer's, what Alzheimer's does is you get lots of plaques and tangles in the brain, and they show up with little black spots, and you can count them. Somebody actually sits and counts these spots on slides. And you can tell whether a person had Alzheimer's or not, and whether they were a stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a 6, worst case scenario. But it doesn't help you at all when you want to know why your toddler throws tantrums. You know, you can't find that out by looking at an autopsy brain. So first, a little bit of biology here. What you see when you look at a brain like this is its outside covering. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's called the cortex, or neocortex, new cortex. Cortex is a word for bark, all right? So that's what covers the whole brain. This is the part of the brain where consciousness is. This is the part of the brain that learns to read, to see, to talk. This is a very, very important part of the brain. You will notice it is deeply folded. 2/3 of this covering, this cortex, is down in the folds. Only 1/3 of it's out on the surface. Do you have any idea why the brain is folded like that? Why do we have, it looks like a giant walnut. What do you think?
I think it's to create more surface.
Okay, so if you look at a sonogram, okay, of a fetus at about 6 months, it's got 3 more months to go, the cortex is smooth, not a wrinkle in it, and the brain is about this big. In the last 3 months that fetus is growing in the womb, it gains a lot of weight, and its head just explodes in size, and its brain gets huge because the baby is learning before it's born. Babies are born recognizing mother's voice over any other voice because it's been amplified. Babies recognize music they heard before they were born. So this brain just starts growing and growing and growing in the last 3 months, but it can't go very far because of the skull. So what it does is it starts folding in on itself so it will fit. All right. So if you look at these wrinkles, now my mom used to tell me if I'd study hard I'd get more wrinkles. You don't. They're pretty much formed when you're born. All right. Okay, so this is called the cortex. Now, what they have learned to do is to look inside a brain now when a person is conscious, awake, and figure out, you know, they didn't know what part of your brain allows you to see, what part of your brain allows you to hear, where does your thinking, higher level thinking and problem solving take place? Where are emotions in the brain? They didn't know any of this. But then they discovered something very interesting. Now what this is they've taken a brain, right after the person, when a person dies, all of the blood drains out of the brain and all of the fluids that are wrapped around the brain, and you've got kind of a solid substance. So what they did with this autopsied brain, as soon as all the blood and fluids had drained out, they pumped in a vinyl substance that was red and then dissolved away the rest of the brain. So this is a beautiful picture of all the blood vessels that you have in your brain. Looks like a beautiful piece of red coral, doesn't it? All right. Now, why do you need all those blood vessels? You have more blood vessels in your brain than in anywhere else in your body except your liver. Why do you need all those blood vessels? Well, the reason is while the brain is only about 3 pounds, it's about this big, it's not the heaviest organ in your body. Your skin weighs twice as much as your brain. Okay, your brain weighs about 3 pounds if you're male, 2 7/8 if you're female, on average. Okay. It is, however, not the largest, but the greediest organ in the body. By that I mean your brain uses 10 times more oxygen than any other part of your body. 10 times more oxygen. Now this is going to be a reason why I'm going to talk about exercise and how very important exercise is for the young child and for you as well. Because what does exercise do? It's going to get more oxygen to the brain, and the brain works better with more oxygen. Not only does the brain use 10 times more oxygen than any other part of your body, your brain uses something called glucose. Now that's energy, all right? Glucose is manufactured in the liver, and your brain uses 25% of all the glucose that your body produces. So this is a busy, greedy organ. However, we have this little problem here. Brain needs a lot of oxygen, needs a lot of glucose, but it doesn't produce either one of them. So where's oxygen produced? In your lungs. Glucose, I just told you. Liver. All right. So how does all that glucose and all that oxygen get up to the brain? Okay, through the system. So if you will take 2 fingers and put them very gently on either side of your windpipe, you should feel your pulse. If you don't, we'll talk later.
No, we probably won't.
Okay. So what you're feeling is your heart pumping blood up through 2 big arteries right here. These are called carotid arteries, and I'll show you that on this slide. See this big one right here? They cut it. Okay, that's your carotid artery. All right. So there's a lot of health issues around keeping your brain working well. Now, we all know what you're supposed to do for your heart. Well, it turns out that a lot of the things that we do for our heart, exercise and eating well, and well-balanced diet, et cetera, are also what makes your brain works. Now, when the researchers found out that the brain operates on glucose and oxygen, they said, what if we could develop a scanner of some kind and ask people to do something like look at something or listen to something and see which part of the brain is using the most glucose? That would tell us more about how the brain operates, and that's exactly what they did. It's called a PET scan. It's a type of brain scanning. So this could be you, all right? Now in this one, you will see this white line drawn all around to show you the outline of the brain, because a PET scan does not show the structure of the brain, it shows where the activity is. Got that? So the eyes are up here. Okay, so this is you. You're in a PET scanner, all right? They have put radioactive glucose in your bloodstream. So they've tagged the little molecules of sugar water with a radioactive tag. Doesn't hurt you. It's about the same amount of X-ray radiation as a chest X-ray, okay? So they have put that in your bloodstream, and then they put you in the scanner. And then they say, I want you to just look at some pictures. Just look. We want to see what part of your brain is responsible for seeing. Well, you will notice it's the back of your brain. So the part of the brain that uses the most glucose shows up in white, then red, then yellow, blue, green, and purple, just like the rainbow. This is why when you bump the back of your head, you see stars. You've disrupted your visual system. Okay, you're still in the scanner, still got that radioactive glucose in your bloodstream, and now I'm going to ask you just to listen to some words. What part of the brain is responsible for hearing? The sides of your brain, here and here. Right by your temples and covering your ears inside. This is the part of the brain, all right? What part of your brain allows you to do higher level thinking, solve a problem, figure out what to do? We're going to find out that that is up here in what we call the frontal lobes of the brain. And this is why you wear helmets when you ride a bicycle or a motorcycle, all right? Because this is the part of the brain that allows you to do your higher level thinking. And it's really interesting. People who have traumatic brain injuries to the frontal lobes or a tumor in the frontal lobes make really poor decisions, cannot solve problems. While they may still be fairly active, Hearing's okay, vision's okay, speech is okay, but the part of the brain that figures things out is not working well. Right? So the next time your kids say, I don't want to wear the helmet, you say, that is not your decision. You either wear the helmet or you don't ride the trike or the bike or the scooter or the skateboard. All right? Okay, so these scans now allow us to understand a lot more about the brain than we ever knew before. They're not all the answers, but a lot of the answers. All right, now, let's start talking about this baby. Let's start talking about a baby before it's born to start with, because this is a fascinating time. During the 9 months that baby is growing in the womb, that baby's brain is growing up to, look at that, 250,000 neurons. Now, a neuron is another name for a brain cell. 250,000 brain cells a minute. You think what the pregnant woman eats and drinks and thinks is going to be important? You bet. And when I say think, that's important. They did this big study where they took rats. Okay, now, rat brains are just like human brains in a lot of ways. They're little, they don't have any folds in them, but a brain cell is a brain cell is a brain cell. It doesn't matter whether it's in a rat, a human, a giraffe, or a hippopotamus. You can't tell the difference. So this is why they do all the studies with animals. So they took mother rats who were pregnant and they stressed them out, just really stressed them. Like they put a little electric grid, so when they stepped on it, it shocked them, a little shock. When the baby rats were born, they had attention deficit disorder. They were not normal baby rats. So they take another group of rats, give the mother rat a nice calm, and the baby rats are less active or overactive. So we're now finding out that not only what the pregnant woman eats and drinks, but the stress level is going to impact that developing brain. These are really, really important years or months. So at birth, I've got a brain that weighs about 1 pound, and it has 100 billion brain cells or neurons. That's a lot. So what's one thing you know about them? You've got a brain this big and 100 billion brain cells. What's something you can tell me about brain cells? They're very little. 30,000 of them would fit on the head of a pin. All right. But these cells are responsible for all human behavior. Your ability to see, to hear, to think, to move, to sing, to feel, everything, we're going to find out are these cells talking to each other. All right. So at birth, 1 pound. What does your brain weigh?
3.
About 3. Okay. So you've got 1/3 of a brain at birth in size. In the first year of life, it doubles to 2 pounds. It goes from 1 pound to 2 pounds in 1 year. Do you think the first year of life is important? Yeah, there's a lot going on. We're going to see what that is. All right. By age 5 or 6, it is 90% of its adult size. Yes.
Does the rate of stimulation have any effect?
Does the amount of stimulation have any effect on it?
On the growth rate?
On the growth rate? To a degree, yes, certainly. Let's say, and there's this horrible experiment they did a long time ago, you may have heard of it in a psychology class. This researcher in Germany wanted to find out if a baby was not exposed to any humans, what language would it speak? All right. And of course, what happened, the babies died without any stimulation at all. Yeah. So they never found out what language they would speak. However, use your general intuition. You do not want to overstimulate babies. What they need the most is loving care. And I'll tell you some other things, talking to them and reading to them and singing to them, those kinds of things. I do not recommend the book, Teach Your Baby to Read. And that's putting it mildly. That's false. All right, and please do ask questions anytime you have them. Yes?
I have a question. A child born with FASD, is the rate of growth the same
All right, so you're seeing a child born with fetal alcohol syndrome
or on that?
on the spectrum. I have slides of that, but not with me. What happens in the most severe cases of fetal alcohol
I
syndrome?
adopted that kid.
Okay, the most severe, they don't have, part of their brain doesn't develop.
Right.
And there's absolutely nothing you can do. That's at the far end of the spectrum. However, as you go on further up the spectrum, the brain is more normal in size and structure and activity. I happen to know of a couple who adopted a fetal alcohol daughter at birth. She's fine. I mean, did well in school. As she became an adolescent, some of her social skills were inappropriate, and there were some. They don't often see cause and effect. If I do this, this will happen.
Yeah, we've had Justin for 14 years. We got him at 5 with very little language, small for his age, a whole host of
So you got him at
things.
5
Yeah, and
with
he's 19
FAS.
now and a regional center client and struggles terribly in school.
Yes, I'm sure he does.
And,
And there's only so much you can do.
Right.
It's really interesting. People,
well, I mean, we hold hope in the bar clear up here,
yes,
so he can see that.
yes. You've heard about drug babies? You know, women who take drugs when they're pregnant. What they've discovered is, of course, alcohol is a drug. But of all of the drugs, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, alcohol is by far the worst because it literally damages the structure of the brain. So if I had a pregnant teen in front of me and she said, I'm either going to do drugs or I'm going to drink, I'd say do drugs. Now, don't walk out of here and say, Pat Wolfe said teens are supposed to do drugs. But I'm not saying that kids who are exposed to drugs have no problems. They usually have lower birth weight. They are more irritable as infants, a higher rate of attention deficit disorder. But when you get them withdrawn from the drugs, which of course they do at birth, and put them in a really good environment, most of them do fine. Not true of FAS, as you have discovered. Which means, have you read The Broken Cord? Oh.
No, I haven't, but he will forever be affected. I mean, I know that the brain does not recover from
Completely,
things.
no. But
His
you
bones are
provide,
different and-
yeah, you provide as much structure as you can, which I'm sure is what you're doing, yeah. Was there another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I heard the name of the book correctly.
The name of the book is The Broken Cord.
The Broken Cord.
That's about fetal alcohol syndrome.
Okay, thank you.
Very readable, very readable. Okay, so now I want you to tell me that brain in 1 year has gone from 1 pound to 2 pounds. What made it get so much bigger? Because it's not more brain cells. At 2, you have approximately the same number of brain cells you had at 1. So would you just turn the person next to you and let's see if you can figure out how a brain doubles in 1 year. What's going on in its environment, do you think? It's not more brain cells. Do any of you have 4 or 5-year-olds? Yeah, go home and look at them. They have great big heads in comparison to the rest of the body. Yeah, yeah. So what do you think is causing this brain to, it'll never do this again. Never do what it does in the first year. What's causing that brain to double in size and weight the first year? What do you think?
Addition of a lot of structure.
A lot of structure,
So
a lot of experiences.
connections, so
Yeah.
connections. And
All right, yeah, so what happens is while you don't get a lot of new brain cells, you get a lot of connections between them. Now this is one of my very favorite slides. So what we're going to look at first, now both of these babies died or we wouldn't have these slides. These are actual slides of a thin piece of cortex, that outside covering, greatly magnified. This is a newborn, all right? These are the brain cells. They have little connections. This is a 2-year-old. Look what happens. So when you learn something, you grow new connections on the cells. They're called dendrites. Dendrites. So what happens, Greek word for tree is dendron, the word for branches is dendrites. I don't know why they had to name everything in Latin or Greek, but they did. So they're called dendrites. So pretend like this is a cell, like a brain cell, a neuron. And this is the cell body, okay? And then these sprout as you learn. So now how many dendrites do I have on this cell right here? 5. All right. Because I only have 5 fingers. But on every brain cell in your brain, you have between 6,000 and 10,000 connections, which means every brain cell in your brain can connect to between 6,000 and 10,000 other brain cells. And that's learning. That's learning. That's what it looks like. All right, so now here's what's really interesting. When you learn something, you sprout new connections, dendrites. But if you don't use them, the brain gets rid of them. It prunes them away. So let's go back to our tree analogy. All right, this is our tree. This is the brain cell. This is called an axon. And we have all these branches. As you learn, you get more and more and more branches. But if any of you have ever had a tree that got too many branches and too many leaves, you call an arborist. And what does that arborist come and do? Prunes away some of the branches so light can get to the middle of the tree so the tree will grow better. Well, that's what the brain does. It prunes away the connections that you don't use. All right? So when you're really little, you get these ideas about how things work, and then later you find out, oh, that's not true. So you get new connections, and the brain's going to prune away. So brain growth and development is a matter of growing and pruning to this day. So tonight, you will grow some new dendrites. You'll learn some new things. You may also get rid of some, because I told you you don't have a right brain or a left brain. And I told you you could drink alcohol, so that might make a big difference. All right.
We don't believe you.
Okay, we're going to stop for just a minute. One of the things that we know is that when you're teaching either your children or a classroom, and I've taught every grade level. In fact, I still am. I volunteer at the Twin School, so I'm still teaching. But one thing I've learned is that you can do a really good job of teaching. And then you can say, now does everybody understand what I've done so far? And what will everyone do? Are there any questions? Everybody goes, well, I happen to know that they don't know what they know and what they don't know. And that if you want to strengthen the connections, you need to repeat them. So we're going to do that right now. So I want everyone in the room to get a partner. All right? And when you have that partner, I want you to decide who's A and who's B. So now you have 3 people here, so you 2 can be partners, okay? So, all right, well, there's 3 there, so. And if you can go back and sit with him back at the back table for just a minute. All right, take this with you. Okay, so did you find a partner? Did you decide who is A and B? Okay, that's not the activity, there's more. Raise your hand if you're the B. Raise your hand if you're B. Okay, you're working first, B. All right, here's your job. I want you to pretend that A just walked in the door and missed the whole first half hour. Now, you have 3 minutes. So what do you think you heard that A really needs to know? What was the most important thing you just learned? I want you to teach it. Now, can you use your handouts? Sure. Of course, that's why you have them. Okay, now A's, don't give B's trouble, because we're going to switch in a little while. All right? Okay, B, you have 3 minutes. What did A miss? Okay, why did I ask you to do this? Why would I ask you to teach something to a person who's sitting right beside you who heard exactly what you heard? Well, other than to give me a 3-minute break. Why would I do that?
Because recollection of it strengthens the connections in your
You
brain.
bet it does. You bet it does. So here are your brain cells. They're going to connect like this. All right. And interestingly enough, they connect with chemicals that your brain makes. Have you heard of dopamine? Have you heard of endorphins? Have you heard of serotonin? Well, these are chemicals your brain makes. So the first time you make a connection, a chemical like serotonin goes from one brain cell to the other. It takes a lot of it to make a connection. If you don't connect it again, what do you think will happen? It's a real weak connection. You can't find it again. But if you repeat it, the second time it doesn't take as much chemical. And the third time it doesn't take as much. So the more you revisit the information, the stronger that connection becomes. That's called memory. Do any of you have trouble not remembering things?
I have a question. Is that
Yeah.
where geometry went?
Yes, exactly where geometry went, and algebra.
And I didn't use it after high school
No,
so much.
no, and you don't use it.
Principles are gone.
Yeah, and if you don't use it, it is a use it or lose it brain. It is a use it or lose it brain. Now, there's some things you remember that you don't need to remember, but evidently they had a lot of emotion in them. There are other reasons. Yes.
I'm wondering about the change in the brain structure. I was reading something recently where they were saying that one of the reasons that childhood memories are lost is not because the children don't recall, but it's because the brain is growing and those connections.
Okay, so the question is, what about changes in brain structure? It's not so much brain structure, it's when certain structure become active. So for example, there are little, you have everything twice in your brain, okay? So you have an emotional center in your right, emotional center in the left, okay. So you have a little structure called the hippocampus, okay? It means seahorse. Somebody must have thought it looked like a seahorse. It's down deep, and it is heavily related to memory. It's what allows you to form new memories and store them up in the cortex. However, no one has any memory of something that happened to them before the age of 2.5 or 3, because that brain structure isn't fully formed yet. All right, so let me give you an example. My grandson had to have open heart surgery at 6 months. He had a heart defect, all right? Now, will he remember that surgery? He'll tell you he does, because he tells the scar, and we explained it to him. We drew a picture, and he'll say, I have surgery. But he has no memory of that because he was 6 months old. So none of you have any memories of anything that happened to you, we call it episodic memory, of an episode before 2.5 or 3, because the structures in the brain that allow you to store it aren't formed. However, the memories, the emotional aspect of it is stored. I'll tell you that in a minute. Ginger, yeah.
That's what I was going to
You're
ask.
going to ask. Yeah, so let's say, probably one of the best examples of that is of sexual abuse before the age of 3. Person does not remember it. No, I've got a better example. Let's say we've got a toddler about 1.5 years old, toddling around the house and walks into a closet, and the door slams behind him, and it's really dark and small in there, and he's scared to death, and he starts screaming. Takes mom a little while to find him. She takes him out, comforts him. Okay, now, if she never mentions that, he will not remember being locked in the closet. However, as an adult, he may have a fear of small dark places. Doesn't want to get in an elevator, all right? So that the brain, the emotional part of the brain, remembers the fear while you don't remember the episode. So that is the basis for many phobias that people have. Brain structures, they're all pretty much there when you're born, all right? Some of them, the brain's going to grow and it's going to get bigger and you're going to make a lot more connections. But it's when the structure becomes most active is more, I think, what you're talking about. Other comments or questions? Yes.
I think it's common to, at least in my recollections, I don't remember anything like probably before 4, I would say, individually. So by when does a hippocampus develop fully?
The hippocampus develops pretty much fully by around 2.5 or 3. And we're all on a continuum. Okay, how many of you have had one child walk early and another one walk late, and as adults they both walk the same? Yeah, yeah. So, was doing this workshop, and this woman says, I remember being born. And I said, that's very interesting, and just went on, because she doesn't. She can't, it's not possible. But you don't argue with a participant. No.
I work with foster parents. I don't live here. I live in Mendocino County, and I work with foster parents and relative teen care providers. And I've heard that some of you are foster parents or adopted parents. And when a child, you get a child into your home, and perhaps they cannot stand the thought of having a bath, or maybe you give them a gift and you think it's a wonderful thing and it's a new dress, but they remember that there was an incident where mom had a new dress and dad then became physically abusive. And we may not understand that these things are triggers because we weren't there, we have no history of that, and there's no way for us to know it, there's no way for social workers
And this is really interesting. You don't know what's behind some of those. I'm sure Ginger knows a lot about this. I had a little boy when I was teaching second grade. His name was David. He was a horrible guy.
He was just a challenging child, he wasn't horrible.
Well, for me at that time. I remember during his spelling test, he throws his paper and his pencil across the room and says, nobody should be expected to spell these damn words. And I said, where'd you hear that, David? And he said, from mom. So no, what had happened, he would go into almost a fit, and we couldn't figure out the trigger. Well, we find out that mom's gone, left dad with David, who's 7, and a younger brother who's 5, and dad's an alcoholic. So we sent the psychologist went to the home, and what they discovered was that, and when she got there, dad wasn't home, and she is talking to the boys. They're there by themselves. The doorknob turns, and they both run and hide behind the couch. It's because they don't know what shape dad's going to be. So what was triggering him in that classroom was someone turning a doorknob. Wow. So we had to leave the door open. Yeah. So a part of the brain remembers, the emotional part remembers. Yeah. And that's why these years are so important. There is nothing more important than holding and loving a child. You can't spoil a baby, all right? When you first pick that baby up when they cry or when they're hungry, what you're teaching that baby is trust. This is a safe place. When I hurt, when I'm hungry, when I'm wet, someone will take care of me, right? I've never understood this letting them cry it out kind of thing. There might be some instances where that's appropriate. I can't figure out what they are. Okay, let's move along because we're not going to get through. All right, so what's going to happen, and I've already told you this, is the connections you use are going to be kept, and those are called pruning. Pruning, okay? And this is going to happen throughout life. So experience changes the brain. Now this is the most important thing we have learned about the brain in the last 100 years, and it's called neuroplasticity. Neuro means mind. What's plastic mean? Malleable, all right? So that means that you can change your brain by experiences. All right, so let me give you an example. Every baby that is born anywhere in the world, already has hardwired into his or her brain the ability to hear and pronounce the sounds of 6,000 languages. Let me say that again. When you're born, hardwired in your brain is the ability to hear and pronounce the sound of any language in the world. However, the sounds that you hear over and over and over, what will happen to those connections? Stronger. What about the sounds you don't hear? That's right. All right. So if you take a newborn, born in Napa, and immediately go to Germany and put that baby with a German family, what will that baby speak? German. You've got that ability. All right. If a child is in a bilingual home and hears both languages spoken correctly about the same amount of time, they will speak 2 languages. Or if they're in a trilingual home, you could learn 3 languages. In fact, the best time to learn a second language is birth to 5. And we, in our infinite wisdom, try and teach it in high school. The problem, how many of you took a foreign language in high school? How many of you speak it fluently today? Why?
I lived there for 14 years.
Okay, you lived there for 14 years, come off of it.
Strong.
Yeah, you don't, because what happened? It makes sense. You've got this brain that says if you repeat it over and over, I'll remember it. If you don't, I took Greek and Latin. That's how old I am. You know what I remember from all of my Greek and all of my Latin, 4 years? Tuus porcus. Means you are a pig. I must have used that one a lot. Yeah. All right. So that ability to learn a second language easily is lost by adolescence. Now, you can learn a second language as an adult, but it's much harder. And highly unlikely you can speak it without an accent. You can almost always tell when a person learned a second language.
So if I wanted my daughter to like be bilingual in Spanish, I would have like her child care providers who some of them do speak Spanish.
And you have a caregiver in the home who speaks Spanish? Or,
No.
yeah, that's what you'd almost have to do.
Okay.
Or marry somebody who speaks Spanish. Yeah,
Or put
that
them
might
in
not be an option either.
one of the schools that are doing bilingual immersion.
But they don't usually start at that young.
Oh, Napa Valley Language Academy starts in kindergarten. In fact, that's the only time you can start. Pardon?
Mine's in preschool and they do it.
Every
Yeah.
school here?
Yeah. And it's important to hear a person who speaks the language fluently, a native speaker, or you'll pick up a wrong accent. I will tell you how they don't learn it. They don't learn it from tapes. And you'll find out why in a little bit. You can't learn a second language well. And that's why I think the Rosetta Stone, et cetera, now has videos, because you have to watch the lips and the tongue. That's what babies are doing. You watch them from the moment they're born. They are practicing talking inside their heads. They're watching your mouth, they're watching your teeth, they're watching your facial expressions. And that's the next thing up here in just a minute. Let me give you another example of this neuroplasticity. What do you think would happen to a baby who's born blind? You have 300 million brain cells back here in the part of the brain that allows you to see. What do you think would happen to all those cells?
They would go to hearing.
Pardon?
They'd go to hearing.
Actually, they change their function. They become auditory cells or tactile cells. So that people who are born blind have more acute hearing and tactile sensation. This,
I'm sorry.
pardon?
I'm apparently not blind. I didn't hear you. I'm so sorry.
I said people who are born blind, all of those brain cells don't die.
Okay.
They become auditory cells and tactile cells. So people who are born blind have more acute hearing and tactile sensation. This is amazing when you think about it. If you have a brain that says, you're not going to use me for one thing, I'll just change my function and you become another kind of cell. It's amazing. So this is a feature throughout life. However, the young brain has much more plasticity than the older brain. All right? And this is one of the reasons why these first 5 years are so critical. Now, as I say, even if you haven't had a good first 5 years and you have to start at 6 or 7, of course you don't say, I'm sorry, it's too late. You know, because throughout life, you can learn, you can grow, you can become better. But the first 5 years, we used to say they're just babies. You know, no, they're not just babies. They are so aware of what's going on. Now, one of the things that we've discovered are called mirror neurons. So these are some brain cells that are activated when you watch someone else do something. It's why you yawn when you see someone else yawn. All right? So what the baby's doing is when they're listening to you, when you're talking to them, when you're reading to them, and they are watching your mouth and watching your facial expressions, these brain cells called mirror neurons are practicing what they're going to do when they're ready to talk. So talking to children and reading to children and maintaining eye contact is one of the most important things you can do, even though, and I think I have the picture here of my daughter reading to the twins when they're 3 months old, and neither one of them are looking at her, you know, but she's reading away, right? Because they are still listening and practicing what they're doing. Well, I'll give you some more practical things here. Within hours after birth, babies will imitate you. So there is no earthly reason for you to stick out your tongue. There's nothing in survival that allows you to survive by sticking out your tongue. But a newborn, a few hours after birth, if you can get eye contact with them and stick out your tongue, they'll stick out their tongue. Have any of you tried that? Yep. When the twins were born, the nurses in the nursery thought I was off my gourd because I've been sticking my tongue out at the babies. Okay. Now, a lot of mirror neurons are found in the speech area of the brain. It's called Broca's area. So they think that these mirror neurons are what allow you to learn to talk. And you learn to talk by listening and watching and imitating and listening. Now, you'll be almost a year old before you have the vocal cords and everything is ready to produce the sounds. But that doesn't mean that they haven't been practicing all this time. You just don't get to see the results for a while. Yeah. Okay. It's not only learning to talk that they imitate, but they all get their sense of security and self-worth from you. So, they're watching you. You are a model for what they're going to become. I'll never forget the first child I had in kindergarten who came out with a swear word, and I said, well, where on earth did you learn that? And he said, at home. Okay, that one's kind of a hard one to deal with. It's not do as I say, kids do as you do, these mirror neurons. So just as teachers, but parents can positively or negatively influence the child's sense of worth, sense of self-concept because of these neurons. Okay. All right, let's look at two big factors now that are going to determine how the brain develops. And A's, you need to get ready because in a little bit you're going to have to teach this to B. It'll be your turn, okay? So you might want to pay attention. We all have genes. You know about genes, okay? There are some genes that are determinants. So in my structure, the genes determined I was going to be female. I don't have anything to say about that. I'm definitely a female, okay? They also determined my height, my hair color, my eye, well, it wasn't this color, but originally. And some of my basic personality is formed genetically. Whether you're a really neat and tidy person or whether you're a person who takes risk, a lot of that is genetic, right? But some genes are predispositions. You're predisposed to be a certain way, but the environment will determine whether or not you become that way. So, for example, let's take a child who genetically is shy. Hides behind your skirt, hides behind your pants leg. Let's take two of them. Let's say they're identical twins and they get separated at birth. And one goes to a family and they're very protective of the shy child. And they say, oh, well, she's really shy, don't talk to her right now, And the other one is encouraged to become more social, all right? Will they both have the same shyness as adults? No. So some genes will determine who you are, but other genes are influenced by the environment tremendously. A really good example of that right now over at the Mind Institute in Sacramento where they study autism. What they think is that autism is genetic. However, you could have the gene for autism and never become autistic. So what they're looking at, the research is looking at, what are the environmental factors that cause that gene to become expressed? Is it toxins in the environment? Is it PCBs? Is it food? And it may be different for different kids, all right? I could have a gene for breast cancer and it would never become expressed. It's the same thing. So lifestyle and the environment determines whether some genes are expressed or not. That's why you need to live as healthy a lifestyle as you can. All right, so we've got genes. They're the basic building blocks. That's what you've got to start with. But because of neuroplasticity, what else is going to determine how that brain develops besides genes?
Environment.
The environment. The environment becomes the on-the-job foreman. So you've got bricks or slate or wood or adobe or something, and now we've got the environment that's going to put the person together. They used to say which is more important, genes or environment. That is not a good question because they both work together all the time to determine what a person will be. Now, you don't have a lot of say-so over the genes the child has, but you have a lot of influence over the environment. I love this quote. This is from Ronald Katulik, who wrote a book called Inside the Brain. He says, the brain gobbles up the external environment, what it hears, what it sees, the child. And then it reassembles that digested world in connections. And those connections are going to go stronger or weaker, depending on the environment. Let's take Mozart. Genetically, Mozart was musically gifted, was he not? It was genetic. Okay. What if he'd been born in the middle of the Gobi Desert? Would he have ever composed anything on the piano? No.
He might have drowned.
He would have figured out something probably, but all right. So you see what I'm saying? You've got your genes, you've got the building blocks, but the environment determines what they're going to look like. So they work together, and it's during these first 5 years that you're laying down the foundation for vision, language, vocabulary, intellectual development, and most importantly, emotional development. Okay, so let me tell you what I mean by foundations are set during the first year. Let's look at vision. Sometimes babies are born with cataracts. Yes, it's not common, but it does happen. They used to wait until they were older to remove them. And what they discovered is the longer they waited, the more visual impairment. They never had perfect sight after that. Now, I just had cataracts removed on both eyes, but I went several years before I had them removed. What's the difference between me and the baby? Why did not mine have to be removed immediately, but a baby's does?
Because the baby's sight is
75, 80 years, okay.
the baby's sight is developing.
Yeah, the baby's sight is developed. Mine's already developed and is deteriorating, right? Okay, yeah. So now they do it immediately. Now they do it immediately. Same thing is true of hearing. The critical period for learning a spoken language is totally lost by age 10. In other words, if you're born profoundly deaf, no sound gets into the brain at all, and you don't do a cochlear implant or it can't be done, you have lost the ability to speak a spoken language by 10. You can sign, which is a language, all right? You know, you can sign what you want, but you cannot speak. So these are called windows of opportunity, all right? And of course, you don't have to worry too much about this because they test babies' vision and hearing immediately, and you usually know right away if there is a problem, especially with hearing. Okay, I've already said this, but learning the second language after 10 or 12 is much more difficult, and it's highly unlikely you'll speak it without an accent. I need to tell you, I included a lot more tonight than I'm going to get through, so I'll either have to talk fast or skip some of it. Now, which do you think would be best?
Talk fast.
No, skip some of it. Okay, babies whose mothers talk to them have bigger vocabularies. Research has proved it. I have finally been vindicated as a talkative mom. All right? Talk to babies. All right? It makes a huge difference. At 20 months, babies of talkative mothers knew 131 more words than infants of less talkative mothers. All right? So I don't care whether they're understanding you or not. Talk to them. They're practicing the words. They're beginning to store them up. All right? Songs. Music and language are intertwined. Now, they are stored in different parts of the brain, which is interesting. all right? People who have a stuttering problem sing without stuttering because it's a different part of the brain. So nursery rhymes are your children's first phonics lessons. And I don't know what happened to nursery rhymes, but I don't see people using them as much as they used to. They shouldn't go out of style. Because what is happening, what do nursery rhymes do? It says rhyme, they rhyme, okay? What you're doing is you're helping the brain understand which sounds are the same and which ones are different, all right? So this is why nursery rhymes is so important. So when they test kids as they get older who are dyslexic, having trouble reading, one of the problems they find is they don't know when words rhyme or when they don't. So I had the twins in the back seat of the car one day, excuse me, probably around 5. And Kira says to me, I can't find anything that rhymes with grandma. Can we make up things? And I said, sure. So all the way home, Shama, Rama, Lama, you know, they go on and on. But that's really, it drive you crazy, but that's good. All right. Sing to them if you can't. It doesn't even matter if you can't carry a tune. But the nursery rhymes are your kids who hear nursery rhymes become earlier readers, period. All right. Simple musical instruments like sticks and triangles, okay, to get the beat, the cadence, are also really important. Okay, this one's really important. This is one of your most important jobs as a parent, is reading to your children, all right? It's going to teach them bookness. Here's a beautiful example. Alex was probably 11 months old. He's not walking yet, he's crawling across the floor. There's a bookshelf with the kids' books, and it's on the bottom shelf. He pulls out a book, and it opened, but it was upside down. And he crawled around to the other side of the book. By 11 months, they know which is the top part of the book and which is the bottom part of the book, even though they can't begin to read. All right? That comes from reading to kids. Why do kids like to listen to the same books over and over and over until it drives you crazy? My second graders wanted to hear brown bear, what do you see? I see a blue dog looking at me. Listen to the rhyme, all right? What it is, they think they're reading. So the more you read to them and they begin to repeat, have you ever seen a kid who can't read, but they've memorized the book? And they're just sitting there reading and they're so proud of themselves. Yeah, turn the page.
She's got it down.
Yep. And when they get older, if you miss a word or try to skip a page to get through the book faster, they won't let you.
What about stories? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
those are different. What about they want to hear the same story over
Same
and over?
thing.
Now, that's not reading, though.
No. It is familiar language, and they're comfortable with it because they know those words. So it doesn't matter whether it's a story or whether you're reading to them. No, they'll want to hear it over and over and over. That's helping those connections be made for the words in the story.
It's reestablishing.
Yeah, the synapses, yeah. A colleague of mine, Dr. Jane Healy, has written a book called Endangered Minds. It's several years old, but it's a good book. And she talks about how kids are coming to our schools now from language-deprived environments. Why would that be?
Computers.
Computers and, well, for the little kids, it's TV or iPads or whatever. Went to a restaurant recently over at Oxbow, and a family came in. There were 5 of them, mother and father and 3 kids. The youngest one was in a high chair, was probably not over 2. All right. All 5 of them were on something. No one was talking to each other. They're all on computers or iPhones.
Even the little one was on.
The little one was on one. The little one was on an iPad, poking. Nobody was talking to each other.
Read a study about the danger of that, of having our little ones on, and electronic devices.
I've got
and
a little bit more information on this a little bit later, okay? So, but what she says is that children are not being talked to or encouraged verbally to interact verbally as much as they used to. And so now we have kids coming into kindergarten who can't even speak in complete sentences. They answer in one word. So one of the things I used to have to do in kindergarten was I'd say, okay, would you like to have the blue ball? They couldn't answer yes. They have to say, I would like the blue ball.
Right,
You had to teach them complete sentence structure because they didn't have it. And they're 5.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
My daughter's 13 months. I think her verbal is coming along a little slower in terms of forming words, but she babbles a lot. So is
Okay. So you've got a 13-month-old who doesn't have a lot of words but babbles. Fine. Some kids talk a lot earlier than others. Some walk sooner than others. I remember one of my sons was not walking at 18 months. It was the second child. And boy, I'm off to the pediatrician. What's wrong with Tom, And he said, when did your daughter walk? And I said, a year. And here Tom is 18 months and he's not walking. He said, when did you walk? And I said, I don't know. He said, go home and call your mother. So I went home and called my mother. Mom, when did I walk? 19 months. And I want you to know, Tom and I walked just fine today. Yeah, all right. Okay. Children watching television are not personally involved with language. In fact, they did a study recently of children watching the Baby Einstein tapes and compared them with children, a like group, a matched group, who had not watched them. Guess who had more vocabulary? The ones who had not watched it, but had their parents talking to them. All right? Daycare. The majority of babies born in the USA today are in full-time daycare within a year. If mom is college educated, the number goes up. Now that's fine if it's a good daycare. All right? However, I don't know if you remember, this is probably 10 years ago. Disney and some of the makers of children's videos got this brilliant idea that they're going to start charging daycares for using their videos because they're for profit. So you would have to, if you bought Lion King, you'd have to pay a fee of $285 a year to show it. So it didn't go, but that came out. So the next day in the Chronicle, a reporter had gone to one of the big prestigious daycares in San Francisco to ask the director what she thought about this. And she said, oh, that'll just kill us. We can't afford that for all the videos kids watch. Maybe we'll have to read them books instead. That's a direct quote. Maybe we'll read them books instead. Okay. The National Association for the Education of the Young Child suggests that there be no television in the first 2 years. No computers, no television in the first 2 years. Now, I subscribe to that, but I want you to know when I was watching both the twins and I was exhausted, I set them in front of the TV, but not very often. My daughter has a TV set but does not have cable. So the kids get to watch movies that she picks. And they are also limited to 30 minutes a day of what the kids call their e-time, electronics time. And that's it, 30 minutes a day, and they're almost 10. Otherwise, they would be on it all the time. The makers of the games, they're very engaging and they're rewarding, and you go up level, just one more minute, I'm almost to the next level. Sorry, your time's up. Yeah. Okay, we'll more of that a little bit later. Oh, here it is, actually. These are some research findings from media. Now, media is TV, computers, mobile phones, tablets, newspapers, and magazines, okay? So that's the whole gamut. Kids are growing up in a very different world today, are they not? Yeah. You see, I remember when there was no television. We didn't get a television set till I was 14. That was a different world. I remember asking what a computer was. In fact, I had the first computer. We weren't here. When I worked for the county office, we were somewhere else. And I got a computer so I could do my dissertation. And I talked to Ed Henderson, who was the superintendent. I said, I will take a half-time secretary if I can have a computer. All right. Now that was, how many years ago? 84, okay. But think about what has happened. In fact, I cannot imagine what the next few years are going to look like. Media in and of itself is not bad, it's how it's used. All right. So some basic statistics. The average American household with children has the average has 4 television sets, 3 VCR DVDs, 2 video game consoles, and 2 computers with an internet connection. Now, I have a group of trainers, and once a year we bring in researchers to talk to this, and this is, let's see, not last year, but the year before. This is just a couple of years old, so this may even be more now, that he shared with us. 30% of 0 to 3-year-olds and 43% of 4 to 6-year-olds, 71% of 8 have TVs in their bedrooms. Number of hours a week in the life of an American school-aged child. Who's going to have the most influence on that developing brain when they're watching 31 hours of TV? And they aren't necessarily programs kids should be watching. You know,
There's so much attitude.
well, and this researcher, Ron Gentile, was talking to us. He said one of the favorite programs of the parents was Friends. But if you really watch some episodes of Friends, they're horrible. They're really horrible. Friends do not do those kinds of things to each other. Yeah. Children spend more time in front of the electronic screen than any other activity except sleeping. So think about this neuroplasticity. Think about how the environment shapes the brain. All right. If this is what we're seeing, so does it have any positive impact on learning? Yes, it can have. Probably one of the best programs was Mr. Rogers. Does anyone remember Mr. Rogers? Yep. Drove parents up a wall because he talked so slowly. But it was perfect for kids. And he'd stop and ask them questions. And then he'd say, I knew you'd know the answer to that. Of course it's blue. You know? Yeah. He gave wait time after he asked the questions. He used wait time. Some of the things he taught, you know, sympathy, empathy, cooperation, imagination. Some computer games. Between the Lions, a really good program for teaching reading. All right. And there are other ones that help kids. A lot of the schools in, I know the kids' school, are the ST Math that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the penguin. Yeah. Yeah, and they do that, little penguin. They do that at home and they do it at school both. And it's an excellent program and was designed by a neuroscientist. Yeah, and it's a good program. It's a good program. What are the negative effects? As I mentioned, baby Einstein decreases vocabulary. Now, this is mostly for older kids, but this one really bothers me. You have down deep in your brain on both sides something called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the emotional center of the brain. And it's going to develop based on the environment, again, how you see other people, how you feel toward other people. What they discovered is that kids who played lots and lots of the violent, kill 'em, shoot 'em up video games, they desensitize their amygdala. It does not see things as horrible as the rest of us. It literally changes the brain. Literally changes the brain. Increased desensitization, increased fearfulness, mistrust, more violent behavior. And violence is not just hitting or shooting somebody, it can be relational, you know, bullying.
Is this just in children, or is this also?
This was just children.
Okay.
Now, would it be true in adults as well? Yes. Yes. I'm
Domestic violence. affects
domestic
kids,
violence, yeah.
Well, even if they've never been
Oh, yeah.
touched themselves, they
Yeah.
can change the brain.
All right, so let me give you some of the key developmental tasks from infancy up to, and of course, I used this opportunity to show the twins, but, okay, so, all right, so what What's really important between birth and 12 months? Mainly attachment to caregivers. One of the big problems with the children being raised in the Romanian orphanages is that they have attachment disorders because they're not held. They're out of their cribs maybe an hour a day. And what they've discovered is that later in life, if they don't get out of that orphanage by the time they're 3 or 4 or 5, that they have great difficulty forming healthy, intimate relationships with other people because it didn't happen with them. Regularity of patterns. They need a fairly consistent pattern, you know, with not a lot of surprises, with new things added gradually. Transitioning from reflex to voluntary behavior. You know, the reflex where the arms, you pick them up and they do the spread eagle thing to the place where they eventually begin to, the fine motor control to pick things up. These are the important tasks. There is no evidence that videos or TV teach any of those things, have any benefit for kids under 2. You know, that's got to be the parents. Read to them, tell them stories, increases language 7 percentile points. Okay, let's look at 1 to 2.5. Curiosity, exploration, they're ready to move now. Begin to see themselves as individuals, different from the world. Beginning independence, I can do it myself. Behavior, learning of language. Do you think media is going to help develop any of these tasks? Can you think of any example? Now remember, media is everything. Manners. Books, perhaps. Books, perhaps. Music.
Music programs for
Yeah.
little children now.
Yeah. But you see, you don't see a lot of benefit from the media, even at 2.5 years. Okay. What about 2.5 to 5? Learning behavior, learning self-control, learning emotional self-control. That's a hard one. You know, not stomping your feet and screaming when you don't get what you want. Learning gender roles and stereotypes. Can you think of any media that might assist in developing these tasks necessary for healthy lifestyles for kids 2.5 to 5? Lots of books out there will do it. Some songs will do it. And there may even be some video programs that you could watch. But I would strongly recommend against, or very limited media up until 2.5 or 3. I love this quote. The biology of our species makes necessary a huge parental investment for the kid. And I hear parents say, well, don't get a lot of time with the kids, but the time I spend with them is quality time. Hey, they need 24 hours of quality time. Having kids is not just something fun to do while you go on with your life.
Now, you use the word parental.
Well,
It can be
caregiver, yes. Caregiver would be, yes. His quote, he did say parental, yes, caregiver. In fact, some kids are a lot better off with caregivers than with parents, as you know. Yeah. Nobody starts out to be a bad parent. I don't think, it's a job nobody educates you for. Nobody teaches you how to be a parent. Intuitively, we do a doggone good job, but that's why maybe workshops like this and the research that's being done, is important. But it's a tough job. It's a very tough job. And you don't always have all the answers. And sometimes it's important to find someone who can help you with them. Bruce Perry is one of my very favorite people in the whole wide world. He's a psychiatrist who specializes in working with kids who've had trauma or who have been neglected. And he says, listen, the brain's not fully functional at birth. It's tremendously malleable. He's talking about that neuroplasticity. The experiences of childhood are going to determine that child's potential. The child who's never been loved does not know how to love. And that's been shown over and over again with the Romanian orphans. the most important thing you do is love your kid, you know, and set some limits. Healthy children are not just bright, they are attached, productive members of society. You know, I see these bumper stickers all the time. My child's on the honor roll. You know, I want a bumper sticker that says my child knows how to get along with other people. You know? My child is happy. My child can collaborate. My child has empathy. My child cares about other people. My child cares about the world. My child cares about climate change. Attached, productive members. You know, we put much too emphasis on IQ and gifted programs. Much too much emphasis. IQ is a very narrow measure of intelligence. It measures how verbally fluent you are and how well you solve problems. It doesn't have a thing to say with how well you get along with other people or how much you care about other people. Yeah. I'll bet Osama bin Laden had a high IQ. Yeah. So, in fact, personal experience, I have a son with an extremely high IQ, 160, and I would give anything had it been lower. I think it was really hard for him. He wasn't like other kids, you know. He had a hard time making friends. You know, he had all the answers. The other kids hated him. You know, because he always had the answers and wanted to tell everyone how he had all the answers. So he had to learn a lot. Now he will be 50 soon, and he has learned a lot of social skills as an adult, but he did not have a happy time in school sometimes because that IQ was too high. So don't. Social, what?
May I ask?
Yes.
In regards to IQ, is that learned versus genetic?
What?
Based on
That
the
IQ? No, that's genetic.
So, okay.
That's genetic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, you can raise IQ with enriched environments, but I'm saying let's forget IQ as a measure. Let's look at the child's social emotional development. All right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So watch me, our time's up here. They need to be cuddled, talked to, sung to, safe, happy environment. You're a model. They're going to copy your behaviors. This is what I was talking about, the Romanian orphans. This is the area of the brain where the amygdala is. We're looking down on top of a brain. So these circles are over, actually the amygdala is right in there. All right. The red shows that it's active. These are 2 3-year-olds. This is the Romanian orphan. No activity in the emotional center because it wasn't hugged and cared for and loved. So you can actually see the difference. Okay, so just you have this. Look at exercise. Sleep is really important. Nutrition. And you as parents have more influence on your culture than any other group. And the better we understand the brain, the better we'll be able to educate the brain. And that's me, my daughter, and the twins. Okay, it is 10 after 8. I need to let you go. Thank you all so much for coming.